As soon as William's on the throne, I think it's over for Andrew. But I think there's a more pressing issue around, William taking a tougher stance right now, because it's now being openly discussed in Whitehall. We had the Newsnight political editor this week saying his Whitehall sources are saying, "Don't worry, William's on the case." And now that is very interesting constitutionally, because King Charles is the head of the monarchy. But the government is under huge pressure to take action here. And that is another thing that is coming back. Cabinet Ministers briefing off the record that more needs to be done. And the palace have been too slow. The political atmosphere is becoming just as febrile in Britain as the public atmosphere. And the word in Whitehall is that William is the man who is ready to take the bull by the horns and get this under control. And so that is very interesting constitutionally, if there are people in government who feel that they need to go to the next in line in order to resolve a major crisis that is starting to arrive on the doorstep of Downing Street, because this is spreading out the palace. This is not just a problem for the king anymore. And Ed Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems, asked during PMQs, is it time for a select committee inquiry into Royal Lodge, into Andrew's finances? And he tacked on the end, should Prince Andrew be dragged in front of that inquiry to give evidence? And Keir Starmer's response, the Prime Minister's response, was vague about which question he was answering, but he said he wanted that to happen. He may just have been confining his answer to the inquiry, but there is obviously the potential, if you have a royal family member giving evidence about a scandal to a parliamentary inquiry, that has never happened before. We are in completely uncharted territory.
Absolutely. And to
your it's interesting what Jack was saying there about infecting other areas. I think it's a really interesting point. If it's infecting politics, that it's getting out of the king's control. I would say that Ed Davey's probably the least fearsome politician, the least scary person that I would want to demand me to come in front of a select committee, the least authoritative leader that we have in this country of any political party currently quite now. But it's a really important point there, and that makes this a worse crisis for the king. He has worked, he has taken action, but if it leaves his control and ends up in politics, in House of Parliament or in the courts, then he is in a lot of trouble.
And just on Jack's earlier point about the fact that we're hearing reports about Prince William's stance, even though he isn't the king, is this creating, from what you know, is this creating another issue whereby Prince William and the king may be seen not to be in lockstep as they've said they are, or what do you know about this?
I think me and Arthur are actually in lockstep about this. We spent a few days out here in Vatican City, and it's all we talk about. But I think we're in lockstep that I think the King and William are in agreement. I think they are doing this together. I think some of the briefings that's come out talking that he wouldn't, Arthur will have his opinion on this, but I think that some of the discussions about that he won't invite to the coronation and he won't do X, Y, and Z. I think that's peripheral at the moment. I don't think we're at that stage. But no, I think that they're a good unit, and King and William are a complete agreement on what to do with Andrew.
Moving on, but only a little bit, I want to focus specifically on the posthumous memoir by Virginia Giuffre, which was released this week. As most would know, and as I mentioned earlier, Virginia has alleged that she had 3 sexual encounters with Andrew over the years, one when she was just 17 years old, while being sex trafficked by Giuffre Epstein. Again, Prince Andrew has firmly denied these allegations, but her book, which is released after her tragic death early this year, it delves into all of this in excruciating detail and makes for really, obviously, difficult reading. Among the claims, she says that Andrew was entitled, quote, as if he believed having sex with her was his birthright. Jack, this book is absolutely damning for Andrew. Do you think that we're going to see him attempt to defend himself again, as we did 6 years ago?
I don't think we will. I think he has no doubt either realised or had impressed on him that his efforts to defend himself in the past went horribly, horribly wrong. And if anything, the public came away feeling like they'd seen enough after hearing some of his absurd excuses and alibis and denials. So I don't think we'll see him defend himself again. But one key thing about the book, a lot of the actual passages about Andrew are very similar to stuff that journalists have engaged with before, because she wrote a book that was never published and it was included in court filings in America. So I had read, virtually word for word some of those passages already, but the public won't have done. And the other new thing about this is because they'll be reading her story in totality, they will begin with her abuse, which she says she experienced at the hands of her father, which he denies, but also, her harrowing childhood. And then they get onto her being groomed by Epstein and of the abuse by him. And then they have already they've already digested all of that by the time they arrive with Andrew. And so one thing that they will be in absolutely no uncertain terms about by the time they reach the Andrew passages is who Virginia was to Epstein. And if some people believe that the photo of Andrew with his arm around Virginia's waist is fake. I am not in that camp. Some people believe that. But if you believe that photo, then you have to ask yourself the question, why on earth would Epstein and Maxwell, and Ghislaine Maxwell, his ex-girlfriend, currently serving 20 years for sex trafficking, why would they fly Virginia all the way to London to meet Andrew? What possible reason could they have had for wanting to do that? In which case, one striking thing about Andrew's interview with Emily Maitlis in 2019 is he never described any attempt by Epstein and Maxwell to lure him into a compromising position. He just said it was all untrue. But, we know who Epstein is. Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted. Andrew's never been convicted. Maxwell has. She's doing 20 years. The allegations against Epstein have been proven true via Ghislaine Maxwell's trial.
What a week it's been for Prince Andrew. He's officially given up the use of his Duke of York title and other honours after what was reportedly very tense meetings with the King and other senior members of the family. Important before we go on, of course, to mention that Prince Andrew has always firmly denied any wrongdoing and all of the allegations against him. But Jack, this bombshell statement from Andrew last week, did it come at the right time? Was it enough?
I think the palace clearly had some idea that things were going to ramp up in terms of the scandal around Prince Andrew. Obviously, they'd have known that Virginia's book was coming. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they had an inkling that there was going to be some more material in the Sunday papers. Obviously, we'd already had some huge bombshell emails, including showing that Andrew had been emailing with Epstein, Sarah Ferguson too. So they clearly knew that more was coming and something needed to be done. So it was definitely a good idea to do something. But the reason why they did not actually manage to head off the crisis at all, really, is I think the framing in that statement from Prince Andrew was all wrong for the moment. So he voluntarily gave up the use of his titles, which always ran the risk of being seen as purely symbolic and meaningless in reality, because obviously he retains those titles. But what added to that is the explanation given was that he was doing it to avoid being a distraction to the good work of the monarchy, and that he has always done his duty. And that is absolutely not how the public see this. The public do not see Andrew as a man who's always done his duty, and they don't see this as about distracting from the monarchy. They see this as being about a woman who is no longer with us, Virginia, who is getting an opportunity to tell her story about 6 odd months after her death. And whose allegations have never properly been tested in court. And what the public wanted to see from Andrew was contrition. Was some understanding of the fact that his friendship with Epstein was morally wrong. We now know that he continued contact with Epstein after the point he told Emily Maitlis that he had flown all the way to New York specifically to break off that friendship.